Tonight we're going to do things just a little bit different than we've done them in the past, where we've had dinner and everybody's tired and maybe we start to fall asleep a little bit sometimes. Guilty. Tonight I'm going to have a conversation with Bonnie, my new best friend. And I think this is the start of a beautiful friendship. I think so. So how many of you are familiar with Bonnie? Before, yes? Excellent, wonderful. Well, we're going to get to know Bonnie a little bit better tonight and learn what it was like to be what people have called a trailblazer. Do you consider yourself a trailblazer, or were you just following a dream?
A dream, the dream sounds good.
The dream sounds good.
Trailblazer, a pioneer. I don't actually, I mean, we have so many wonderful women dating back to the 1800s, actually, and balloonists. And one gal, I can't think of her name, we talked about this earlier, was one of Napoleon's aviators that flew a balloon for him in war, and it actually got shot down. But there are so many amazing gals like Harriet Quimby in 1911, and then after that everybody talks about Amelia Earhart, but there were many people before Amelia Earhart. One thing I did like about Amelia Earhart the best, that she was a wonderful pilot, but she was also a feminist, and she really admired women trying out for any job, anywhere, whether it was flying or in business or teaching, whatever it was. She was a real advocate for women, which was very inspiring for sure.
Bonnie, how were you inspired to learn to fly? Was this something that you grew up in an aviation family and you had strong role models?
Yes. I can just say yes.
Yeah.
I was literally dipped in aviation my entire life because my dad was a pilot. He flew for SAS, he flew for TWA, Air Transport Command. You saw him up here when we had an FBO. He had an Electra, Lockheed Electra. We had a twin-engine Piper. We had a Cessna 310. We had a bunch of airplanes, mostly Cessnas, 172, 150, and the list went on. And my father taught my brother, Alan, who was up there. He was one of the captains that I was standing next to, or the captain I was standing next to, and both our uniforms were. He was, at that moment in time, I think he was with FedEx, and had gone with Seaboard, Tigers, FedEx. And so they really focused on my brother, and every time I said, gee, I'd like to be a pilot too, they always tapped me on the shoulder. Oh, that's so sweet, yeah. It's not gonna happen. And to the point where I really did want someday to be a pilot, and I went off to college, and I started taking flying lessons. And I quit college and came home on my father's birthday and showed him my logbook. And he was so excited that I had enough hours. I had 7.5 hours, I think. And he said, well, you can get your student license with 8 hours. And the very next day I went to the airport, Pompano Beach, Florida, and I went up with an instructor, and he said, would you like to solo? And I said, yeah, you know, but I didn't have my medical. See, she really knows way more than I do about this, so I'm going to refer to Sarah all the time. So I went, I got my medical, came back the next day, and then I was a student pilot. And then from there, I kept going, and I did leave college, and I did a whole bunch of other things, but I just kept progressing slowly on my own, and started teaching and started doing charter flights, and just went from there. And then American hired me. Who knew?
Let's talk about the little bit of time just before you got the call from American. One of your male passengers when you were down in Pompano Beach, who likes baseball?
Oh yeah.
In the group here. How many of you have heard of Ted Williams?
Oh,
You
wow.
had the distinction of having Ted Williams charter a flight with you. Can you tell us about that experience?
It was exciting. I didn't have any clue who Ted Williams was. I just knew he was a very tall man, and he had his business advisor with him because he wanted to go to Wauchula, Florida, which was a little grass field north of where we were, and I can't really remember the miles, but it took us about an hour to get there in my 172. And it was early in the morning, so I opened up the fixed base operation, and I pulled the airplane out of the hangar, and I said, well, okay, we can go. And he said, well, where's the pilot? And I said, well, that's gonna be me. You know, I had tails and, you know, halter top and my short anyway. He asked me for my license. So I did give it to him, and he decided to sit in the front seat with me, and his business manager was sitting in the back. And he also was a Navy aviator, so he obviously knew his way around an airplane. And so we got to Wauchula, Florida, and we landed, and I guess he was quite pleased when everybody went to lunch. A couple picked him up. It was an orange grove is what he owned in Wauchula, Florida. He was going there just to check it out. So we all went to lunch together at the farmers, I guess you call them farmers then, at their home, and it was lovely. And when we left to come back to Pompano Beach, he sat in the back with his manager. So I thought, okay, he really thought I could fly, or at least he knew he was tall enough he could grab the controls if he had to. But it was a fun experience. He was quite a gentleman.
So
fun to be with.
Somebody who maybe had some reservations, but immediately accepted you after he'd
Yeah,
seen.
he was not happy.
What, did you experience rivalry with other women pilots? Was it something where everyone was supporting each other, or did you have an experience with a particular woman who showed up at Pompano Airport and you weren't impressed initially, but later on you became good
what
friends?
happens is that if you're the only woman at the airfield at the moment, you get a little spoiled, and you're happy because you get more people wanting to learn to fly than with the other pilots, with the other instructors, because they're male and they're a female.
It helps when you're young and attractive.
And well, just young. So one day, there were two pit specials that went over the airport, and they did all kinds of aerobatic, you know, maneuvers and everything. And they came down, and one gentleman, I can't think of his name at the moment, but the other little airplane, there was a young gal with long blonde hair, short shorts, looked fabulous, and all the guys, right over there. And I thought, gosh, why don't you just get in that airplane of hers and leave? We don't have to really see her here very often. And it turned out she felt the same way about me. So we were always very nice to each other. Hello, how are you? Very nice you're here. And then we kind of ignored each other. And over time we sort of got to know each other a little better, but not much.
At first, yeah, right. Let's talk about that. You had 1,500 hours or so by this point in 1973, and people were saying you need to start applying to the airlines.
I certainly did that.
And how many of you have seen one of these? The OAG. Your father had a travel agency in Pompano Beach, and he said, Bonnie, you can write to the airlines because all of the airlines addresses were listed in the OAG. Did any of you write to the airlines?
Oh, yes.
Yes. How many of you got jobs by doing that? Maybe later. Yes, exactly. Lots of people. So you wrote a letter to American Airlines?
Oh, just about everybody.
Just about everybody. And American sent you a telegram?
Well, I had some pretty nasty replies from some airlines. I won't mention their names at the moment, but one airline said, don't ever write us again because we are never going to respond to you. And I thought I should have kept these kind of letters so I could have framed them all and done something with them anyway. But for the most part, I got very disparaging remarks, and they were all negative, except for American Airlines and actually TWA too. But they both said they had furloughed, but they said keep writing, keep updating, what you're flying and how many hours you have, and we'll let you know when the furlough's over. And so it was actually a guy, his name was Gene Steele, who was a United pilot, but he was furloughed as well, and he was a lawyer, and he was with the FAA during the time he was furloughed. And he looked my name up under my license, and called me one day and said, you know, American is hiring again, you should really write to them back. And I did, and sure enough, American said, come on in for an interview. And that was sort of the end of it. I got a letter from them, I did go in for the interview, it was wonderful. I mean, it was very, there was a physical, there was other guys there, every single one of the men that were there, sorry about those guys, but they had their, sideburns were trimmed, so they had a little white spot. Everybody had this white spot on their cheek, and they all looked with the exact same kind of, navy blue, nice tie, white shirt. Eventually, American sent me a telegram that you saw up here, that they did select me for, training, and that was that. So I took this in, I'm now talking about this gal Debbie. I segued into something else, but anyway. I go into operations at the FBO, and it's pouring rain outside, so all the guys are hanging around, and I said, guess what, I've got this telegram, I'm getting hired by American, I'm so excited. And they just kind of said, oh yeah, good, hey, fine, that's okay. Picked up their newspaper, didn't say much more to me. And Debbie, that was in there, Debbie Gary, she grabbed me by the arm, pulled me outside, and said a bunch of blank, blank, blank words. And these guys have no idea where you're going in life, what you want to do. And we sat out there and talked a little bit, getting drenched. And I knew instantly she was going to be one of my best friends, and she happens to be my son's godmother. So we became such close friends so quickly, and just getting to know her as a woman and as a pilot and all kinds of things that she did, that we kind of didn't give each other credit for whatever it was, because we were little, like cats, running after each other.
Right, not right away, but you definitely, women support each other, absolutely.
Yeah, we really do. We really learned that.
So once you were at American Airlines, you were in training, and they need to find a uniform for you. The training is one thing, you're doing all the same things as
sort of.
Your male your male other colleagues are doing. But they can go to the uniform store and they can just say, I need this in a 34, 36, I need this and that. You couldn't do that. So you needed to come up with a uniform. Can you tell us a little bit about the process of developing the uniform?
It wasn't really my choice. The second day I was there at training, Captain Ted Meldon, who is the vice president of flight, called me up to his office, and I thought, oh my God, I've already made a mistake, and they're firing me. But he had quite a powerful voice too. Every once in a while, he'd slam his hand on the desk and say something, and he'd say, oh, excuse me, didn't realize there's a girl in the room. Okay. And he said, we want you to look like a pilot, a real pilot, but we want you to look like a female pilot, not a male pilot. So we went through, he had somebody, another line pilot, who was actually his turn to instruct in the simulator. So he was here in Dallas for a while. And he was assigned to me to go to all the different malls around Texas, it seemed like, not just Dallas, to figure out whether we should do a double-breasted, a single-breasted, cut it in at the waist so it had some sort of shape to it. And the shirt that you saw with the white ascot, I actually went to an equestrian store and bought that because I just thought it looked better with like a white tie instead of and I didn't want a tie or anything. And so we created our own uniform, Hart, Schachner, and Marks. I remember the company that came and actually, and it was all blue gabardine, because that's what the guys were wearing, gabardine too. So the uniforms looked sort of alike, but mine was definitely for a woman and not for a man. And I thought that was, I really enjoyed that, and I think they were kind of adopting me into the airline business in a funny way. It was wonderful. Funny, but wonderful. But what they didn't let me do was, Ted Meldon said, I don't want you to have pockets, because if you have pockets in your shirt or your jacket, your pens are going to stick out funny. And okay, no pockets.
What did you do with your pens and keys? keys.
I bought a
and
little
things like
purse and they all went in my purse. It was sort of silly, but eventually I got pockets.
You carry a purse on your walk around?
Yeah. Yeah, a screwdriver in it. So.
And where is your uniform today? Do you have it
At the Smithsonian.
At the Smithsonian.
Yeah. I'm dating myself now.
Well, my husband has flown a plane that's in the Smithsonian. So,
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Why do you think that, I don't want to say so many years later, but from the time that you were hired at American until today, there seems to be a large portion of society outside of this room that really still seems to think of female pilots as kind of a novelty. And you hear gasps sometimes when people are walking through the airport, oh, there goes a female pilot, and that, why do you find it interesting, confusing, shocking?
To a point, I think for the most part, they still think we're kind of a strange obstacle going around. But I think aviation is exactly like any other kind of business. There's so little I know about banking, and I don't know who the CEO is or the president, or if there is a manager of something or other. So I don't even know what the titles are and those kind of things. So I think a lot of people are enamored with aviation, but don't really know it. And I think, or what it's like, or how many. I mean, we have International Society of Women Airline Pilots. We have the 99s. We have Women in Aviation International. There are so many organizations that are solely for women, basically. And we have schools that, are mentors for people. We have, even American Airlines now started a cadet school. So it's not just for women, obviously, it's for young men and women to go to the cadet school. And they had their graduation quite recently, actually. But I think it's really for those of us who are dipped in aviation, who like aviation, who want to participate in aviation, that are more aware of when they see a female pilot. It's okay. That's a normal thing.
It's a normal thing.
Yeah.
Exactly. Very similar to a male nurse.
Exactly right. Yeah. Whether you're in medicine or anything, it's so true.
It doesn't matter. When you were a new hire at American, the media was fascinated by this entity, this being called Bonnie, the first female pilot hired at American Airlines, and they were wanting to interview you, and they wanted to take pictures, and they wanted to cover your progress. Did you find that distracting? How did American handle requests to?
American really handled it well, because it was distracting, and I was just trying to get along with the guys there, and we were really had a lot of camaraderie right from the get-go, because we were all new hires. There were 214 of us, and with the press, American just said, if and when she graduates, then you can ask questions and you can, interview her. But until then, please don't come on campus, don't interview her, when they're all out to dinner together or something, don't bother them. And that's what happened. And then we had a little press conference after I graduated. Thank goodness I graduated. That was actually the hardest thing for me, because when I did, when I was hired, it was in the 70s, early 70s, when it was the women's movement out. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was looking for a job. Betty Friedan, who wrote Feminine Mystique, she started NOW, National Organization of Women. So everything was stirring up during that time. And we were making a lot of progress in all sorts of different venues at that time. And the press really wanted to take full advantage of it. And I really don't blame them. I mean, it was important for everybody to be in that position. But anyway, I know how I was going to say about that, because too, I thought, if God forbid that I flunked that training, my 8 weeks at the flight academy, I would have ruined it for a lot of female pilots that wanted to be, with the airlines. So you work as hard as you possibly can, and it all worked out.
Even though you weren't yourself saying, I'm going to be a role model for young women and for girls everywhere. In 1978, you were featured on a trading card of the Super Sisters trading cards, and these were, there were, I think you were number 28. I counted that up, number 28 out of, I think, 50 or 60 different notable women, including Gloria Steinem, Helen Reddy, Rosa Parks, Margaret Mead, Katharine Graham of the Washington Post, Jane Pauley, Marlo Thomas, Buffy St. Marie, and Bonnie Tiburzi.
Yeah.
And did people recognize you when you walked through the airport? Did you ever
I
have
don't really know
anyone?
how many people looked at those Super Sister cards.
Okay.
And how they started was there were two women, and they had daughters. And what they didn't like was that all the young guys in the neighborhood, the little boys, had baseball cards. And they would trade their baseball cards. And they said, well, gee, our daughters don't like baseball, and they don't have anything they can trade. So that's why they went ahead and decided to do these Super Sister cards of people from all different backgrounds and all different jobs and everything, so that their daughters could then learn the same thing. The boys were learning about baseball, they were learning about women and working and what they did for a living. So that's how that started.
Fantastic. I need to find one of those on eBay. I'm surprised nobody here has had
Yeah, it was a
one
long
of those
time.
over the years.
Long time.
When you started at American Airlines, what was your position and what was the airplane that you were flying?
Yeah, I was flying this, we all did this when we started. We were flight engineers. And, yeah.
On what aircraft?
Oh, the 727, sorry,
727.
yeah. And once we got rid of the 727, then with the 757 and 767, and pretty much everything else after that, obviously, there were no engineers. So the co-pilot and the captain took care of it. And the only time we had a three-cockpit crew was when you had, overseas flights and over a certain number of hours. So we'd have
Augmented
Yeah.
crew and things. Now, you found out several years after you became a flight engineer that you got your rating. There was something special about you becoming a flight engineer.
Yeah.
When you found out, what was it, 6 years?
Yeah, 6 years after, well, I was then probably a co-pilot at that point finally, but Leroy Ledden was the head of all flight engineers at American Airlines, and he's the one, even when I went for my check ride, he had to, be there watching to make sure I was doing everything right, I guess. And, but he called me one day, like 6 years after I was flying with American, and he said, I've been researching this, and I think I was the first man to instruct a female flight engineer. And so I'd be first, he said to himself, not to me. He was so cute about it. He said, but I'm gonna research it some more because I think you were first. And so together we made got the idea, or learned anyway, that I was the first one in the world to fly as a flight engineer on a turbojet airplane. And he was the first person, didn't have to be a guy, but the first person to have taught a female flight engineer. So he was pretty proud of that. And he was a good instructor, I must say. So.
Fantastic. Between the airplanes that you flew at American, the 727, the 757, the 767, which was your favorite to fly?
Oh, it had to be the 757.
The 757?
Yeah, that was like a little sports car. How many of you have flown that airplane? But it would do anything you wanted it to do. It really behaved when you flew, and it had so much power for the amount of weight it had. It was really a great. It was like a little sports car. Where the 767 was like a Cadillac. It just kind of did its own thing.
I've heard the 757 referred to as the airplane that God built because it just seems to be perfectly designed, fun to fly.
I know. Why don't we still have those? Is my big question.
We need more. We need a campaign to keep the 757.
Oh, yeah. It's flawless.
So where were you flying? Where were your favorite places to fly? Because as you became more senior, you could pick and choose the benefits of seniority. And where did you like to fly?
Just about everywhere. It's amazing. Because on 727, we would be going to Rochester and Albany and back and forth Chicago. but once I got on the 757 and 67, and I was pretty senior then, and I went on as a captain. I didn't fly co-pilot on those, but I went to Europe a lot. I love Paris, London, Zurich, Rome. I love those routes, but I really also love the Caribbean. I loved to fly, like when I had children, flying down to Barbados and back, round trip on the 757 was just blissful. And you end up flying it 7 days a month because you get all those hours going down and all the hours coming back. That was wonderful. I loved that. Bermuda was a great, I really liked them all. It was, especially Europe. I just thought that was great fun. My husband liked to go along on those. It was nice flying. And being senior, I could pretty much pick what I wanted to. Actually, though, the last 2 years of my career, I retired early. But instead of, I think I mentioned this to you, but instead of picking Europe or going across the Atlantic or going down over the Amazon, going to, Rio de Janeiro or something was always fun too. But I just chose San Francisco and LA because I thought, I'm retiring in 2 years. I want to make sure I don't have any accidents and nothing happens. And I didn't want to have something like an engine loss and end up in the Atlantic or even in, the Amazon. So, and I thought, well, it's okay because I can always land over Ohio, or I can land pretty much anywhere. So, anyway, those last 2 years were pretty blissful, I must say.
Were you based in New York your entire career?
Like Boston, the very first time I started flying, but that was just TD. What do we call it again? TDY. Yeah, and so I was there maybe a month or two. And then the rest of the time it was LaGuardia, Kennedy, mostly Kennedy and Newark.
And when you were at home in New York, you got involved with Wings Club.
Oh yeah.
And you had some prior family relationship with the Wings Club, and what brought you into the Wings Club?
Well, I don't think I give my father credit for that because maybe he was, instrumental in it too. But the president at the time,
the gentleman from Continental?
Yes, last name Lawrence.
Lawrence?
Yes.
Harding Lawrence?
Yes.
Harding Lawrence, okay.
Brava.
Yeah.
Married to Mary Wells, who did the Braniff uniforms. And he wrote me a letter and invited me to the Wings Club, which I thought was really nice. And I did become a member, and I had the best time there. They put me right on the program committee, and every month the Wings Club would have somebody from aviation talk there. Sometimes they'd have Crandall, the CEO of American. Sometimes they'd have the head of Boeing, or they would have Pratt & Whitney engines or something. So it was always, but February, when it was Valentine's Day, all the CEOs or presidents or whatever they did, in the aviation world, they would invite their secretaries to come to the Wings Club, and they gave them a little chocolate, chocolate heart candy, and then a little, always a carnation. It was always a red carnation. And we all sat there together looking around at each other, not knowing all the secretaries, but there we were. And I remember thinking to myself, this has got to change. We have to do something for Valentine's Day and the, having just the secretaries come. And so they gave me February to work on, and I started with, it was called the Women of Accomplishment Luncheon. And so I invited the first person I had as the keynote speaker, and the person who introduced everybody was, and I'm sure you know this person, and I can't think of her name offhand, Maureen O'Hara. And she was officiating, she had some, either it was TWA or Pan Am. Wasn't it Blair, her husband?
Charles Blair.
Charles Blair, that's right. And they had that seaplane thing going on in St. Croix, but he also worked for, I think it was Pan Am, I'm guessing.
Flying boats.
Well, the flying boats too, but for Pan Am Airlines too. So she was nice enough to say yes, that she would be the keynote speaker. And then I got Moya Lear from, yeah, you know this, did I tell you all this already? and Polly Bergen for acting, and then there was Meryl Seabird for New York Stock Exchange, and we got a whole slew of amazing women. And the Wings Club at that time had the biggest audience that the Wings Club ever had, because everybody wanted to come and meet these women, and they were amazing. They stood up and they talked about their industry and their business and what they did and everything. And for me, it was a wonderful opening to see what other women are doing, you know, during the era of the 70s. So it worked out well, and we continued to do that. We had Janet Guthrie, the first race car driver. We had all kinds of, guests there. And so anyway, we did change. The women changed it. Women changed the Valentine's Day luncheon. Worked out well.
Wonderful, wonderful. I can only imagine the stories that would be told.
Oh my gosh.
In that room.
Moya Lear never stopped talking. I gave everybody 10 minutes and she talked for about 20. But that's okay.
That's okay. So let's fast forward. You retired in 1998, and you retired on your 50th birthday.
Yep.
And decided that there's more to life than coast to coast flying, and I need to spend time with my family.
Yeah.
And then you haven't really kept a low profile, but you were doing other things. And then maybe 5 or 6 years ago, you're getting a phone call, and you weren't sure if you should take the call, and it was American Airlines calling you. Why were they calling you? What was the reason for them to call?
I had no idea. I was hanging up on it. My husband and I just came back from a trip to Rome, and very few people ever call you on the telephone anymore. It's always texting or emailing or something. But anyway, I had a call, and it was this guy, and Brian, I think, I can't think of his last name. Anyway, you don't need to know. But he was in public relations with American Airlines, and he said, we're thinking of doing the independent films and donate to a mid-career director, female director. And we would like you to represent, and we're gonna make it the Bonnie Award. And I thought, wow, well that's kind of exciting. So anyway, they came up to New York, and we met in New York, and so they could interview me and I could talk to them to find out what was going on. But the funny part about and I of course accepted, and it turned out to be great. It was a 4-year thing of Chloe Zhao was the very first mid-career winner for this, and she did, I don't know if you've seen this, but you should have, because one of the No Man Land was an Academy Award, and then the other two films that she did, The Rider and The Songs My Brother Taught Me, and she got all kinds of accolades and did a really great job, and we gave her a $50,000 award, plus she got an enormous amount of miles, even though she's afraid to fly. She was going to use those miles anyway. So that was great, really. Oh, and this was the young man who came up and interviewed me, and he was a PR person, and they called a PR firm, and they said, we're looking for somebody, we don't know who in our company we could ask to, present this award, but, so we need an outside PR company. So the PR company came, and they sat down at the table, and they opened a file, and in the file was my information. And they said, don't you know you have the first woman pilot for a major airline? And they had no clue. The PR department of American. So anyway, so thank goodness anyway, they asked me, so that happened.
They know who you are now over at American Airlines, because your picture is, your picture's on the globe at American. Just your name. Your name is on the globe, but your picture's in the C.R. Smith Museum. Yeah. So they know who you are now.
They don't tell me any of this, they just do it. And then I find out about it.
If you could go back and do it all over again, is there anything that you would change?
I might have only almost stayed just a few more years, because I really wanted to try the 777 and the 787, and I was senior enough to get the 777, and I thought, I'm only going to be here 5 more months. Am I really going to spend the time? 8 weeks in training and then fly the airplane 2 or 3 times and then retire. It didn't seem quite fair, but there's a few things like that, and our bidding system changed radically, so you could really get time off that you want and spend time with your family at the same time. But other than that, I think everything went really well. After 26 years, I just thought, enough is enough. I have a family to raise. They were in middle school, and I didn't always want to be gone when they had something going on. And it worked out. It worked out well. I think 26 years was okay. That was enough.
You heard tonight, Phil Brooks had an event talking in his sleep and making a passenger boarding announcement. Has your husband or any of your children ever said that you've made announcements or radio calls in your sleep?
No, the only thing I do say is I used to constantly say, oh my God, I forgot my flight bag. I forgot my flight bag. And my husband would say, okay, you forgot it already, enough.
Did you want to take some questions from?
Oh gosh, that's up to you if anybody has a question, but I don't know if I could answer anything at this point. I've been retired a long time now.
Does anyone have any questions? Yes, Chris is coming with the microphone. If you could please wait for the microphone.
Just curious, what did you think of the 727? I've always loved it, even growing up, as a kid and everything. Was that your first plane, or what did you think of that? I knew the 57 was your favorite, but.
Yeah, I should say also the 727 was really the workhorse of the airline. I thought it could go anywhere, do anything. It was a little sluggish compared to the 757, and you couldn't always, pick the airport or the runway you choose. But no, it was a wonderful airplane. And it really was very responsive and slower, but it still was responsive, and it really was, I think, the workhorse of the airline.
You also logged some DC-3 time before American Airlines.
Oh, I was going to say not with American.
No, not with American. Before that, flying in the Caribbean. Flying in the Caribbean.
Yeah, okay.
The DC-3.
DC-3 is great. Yeah, but I was not a very good tail dragger lander. Made little bounces.
Hi. Did you ever save the correspondence that said, "Don't contact us again"? That belongs to us.
Yes.
So.
No, I should have, you're right. I should have kept all those letters and made a huge collage out of it or something, but I didn't have the nerve to write them back because they said, don't do it. So I thought, I'm going to write. But American, when they sent me the letter, it was amazing. I couldn't get over it, and I was just really, it's the Ides of March when I got my telegram. Yeah, 50 years ago, it was March.
Hello. Right after you were hired, didn't Frontier Airlines also hire a female pilot? And if so, do you recall her name?
Emily Howell. Emily Howell Warner, and she sadly passed away recently. But she actually was hired before me, and it was I think January 29th, 1973.
Yeah, I thought I remembered that.
Yeah, she was a great gal.
Thank you.
Did you ever have a chance or desire to fly the mighty 707 as a flight engineer or co-pilot?
No, but you know what they made me do with the 707? They did give one other gentleman a strength test while we were in training, because they tested me with everything. Anyway, they called me out of the classroom one day and said, oh, don't worry, Bonnie, because you're not the only one that's going to take the strength test. And anybody under 140 pounds or under 5 feet 6 inches high has to take the test. And there was one other guy that was under 140 pounds, and he was not happy about this. But I never flown a 4-engine jet. I never flew a jet before, and they put me in the simulator, and they took me up to cruising altitude. It was the chief pilot. I was in the captain's seat. There was a simulator instructor, and then another pilot in the jump seat. And so, anyway, they gave me full trim, forward trim, and cut 2 engines. And so I finally straightened the airplane out, and finally got it, pulled it up. I hadn't been able to use the trim yet, so I pulled the airplane up. So every time I let go to reach for the trim, the airplane went back to a dive. And I tried that 2 or 3 times, and I thought, okay, the only limb that I have not working and doing anything is my leg, one leg. Because one leg is on the rudder pedal, and one leg is just sitting there. So I took my leg, wrapped it around the bar for the yoke, and I held on to it, and well, it was the other hand, actually, and then I just trimmed the airplane up, and it worked. But the guys just started laughing, and they said, well, we've never seen that before, let's have lunch. Today.
A little bit different, but equally as effective.
Yeah.
Definitely. Didn't matter how you did it, you just had to do it.
So you were the first female pilot at American. When did the second female pilot arrive at American?
Are you looking for the name of the gal?
No, when? I'm just how long ago were you?
1976.
So how many years? Months or?
Yeah, it's 3.5 actually, because I think it was towards like October, November of, and gosh, what, Angela. I think her name was then Mason, but now it's a married name and I don't know what it is. But that's 1976.
That's quite a long time.
Yeah, well, we were furloughed in between too, when Reagan had the, fuel shortage and all of that sort of thing, but we were back and forth and, yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Early in your career, did you ever get a feeling that you were being not quite as respected as a male counterpart by anybody in your crew, or did you ever get that feeling during your career?
I know what you mean, because I've talked to a lot of gals that have had issues like that. I really consider myself lucky. I think we really worked together well. There were a few disparaging remarks here and there, like one guy walked by me once and said, oh, Eastern's hiring, in case you want to know. Thinking, okay, we don't need you here, but go with Eastern. But other than that, the guys are really great. We really quite close from the get-go. And we studied together, we jogged together during training, we did a lot together. And I was telling Sara today, too, that, and we bonded in a way that, if they needed their buttons fixed on their shirt, they would always come to me. We got along really well. And even on the line, we got along really, it all worked out really well, for me anyway. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, Charles, right here.
Yeah, actually that was the question I was going to ask. But as a sidebar, I'm curious, have you done any flying since? Any general aviation or anything like that since you stopped flying for American?
Well, I hate to say it, but I did actually, I thought I would start flying again. We had a little place in Florida at the time, so I thought, oh, every time I go down there, Lantana Airport is a nice little airport, and I'll start flying again, near where I used to train in Pompano. And it was funny because when I went there, they said, oh yeah, we have a 172 you can fly, and there's an older guy that, it's his plane and he teaches and this and that, so I made an appointment for the next day. And it turned out a captain that I'd flown with at American, and I was, he took me up again and he taught me a few things and signed my certificate that my annual flight review was okay, and he said, nice job there, Bonnie. Okay, thank you.
You had another interesting experience with an FAA inspector on board an aircraft. You were just doing a regular flight. He shows up and he asks to see your logbook, and he recognized your last name.
Yeah, they obviously asked for your license, and you always get nervous when the FAA is sitting behind you. So I gave him my license, and he looked at it and he said, Tiburzi. He said, I just flew with a guy at Seaboard. Best check ride I ever gave, and that was my brother. And I thought, oh God, just please don't rate me like my brother. I said, he's older than I am. He flew more planes than I did.
And that was the day before that
Yeah.
he had
day before.
Giving your brother the check,
So
right?
anyway, I passed. I mean, he didn't say much.
He didn't say it was the worst, he didn't say it was the
Oh,
best.
that's, yeah, okay, that's good.
That's good.
Good, Tom, right here.
You said that you applied at a lot of different airlines, and a lot of them just outright rejected you. Why do you think, or do you have any reason why American decided to pick you?
You know, I really don't have any idea. It's funny because there's a book out now about stewardesses. I think that its name of it is something like 30,000 feet stewardess rebellion. That was it. Because American, even in the late 60s, they had a lot of problems with the flight. Anyway, I shouldn't even go in with that, but it was stewardesses at the time. There were no guys. They were talking about if you're going to wear, a short skirt or a tight skirt, or you're going to not get married, you're not going to have children, you're going to have your hair a certain way. And there was a lot of things going on. And I often wonder if because I, at that moment in time, wanted to be a pilot, not a stewardess, that maybe American switched gears a little bit or something, saying, well, okay, now we're going to open our doors to women pilots. We've already now opened them to male flight attendants. They started using the word flight attendants instead of stewardesses. And I just think they were on that roll of wanting to hire women. And somehow, I just can't answer that. I wish I had a better answer, but I've got to say that the management was great, the instructors were great, the guys that I worked with were really wonderful, and it worked out really well for me, for sure. Yeah, I respected that in a big way.
Two more questions. I got one right here. Rick?
Were you at one time in a TV commercial? I think you were running in a cab or something to replace a pilot that got sick, and I think it was you that was doing a checklist, check set, stuff like that.
I could have been, I don't remember it in a cab though.
Okay.
Yeah, but American didn't want me to, so there was a lot that, I sort of got away with it, but.
One more? One more.
Yay, I have the last question. Hi, Bonnie. I do have the last question. Do you remember when you were flying for the first time with another female pilot, and how was that experience?
You mean with American?
Yes.
Yeah, the one gal that I did fly with for a month, normally I would get somebody and she was like just deadheading or going on one leg of the trip and then getting out and doing something different. But it was Parker. Oh gosh, I can't think of her name, and we flew for a whole month together, and I still know her, and I still, well, maybe I don't know her that well. But yes, we flew together. Was there a reason why you?
No, I was just wondering.
Yeah.
Did people clap when you landed, or?
No, but I must say, one time I did make a really horrible landing when I was a co-pilot, and a woman, it always has to be a woman, comes up to the cockpit leaving, and she said to the captain, who's a big guy, Reggie Hurd, and he was in the doorway, and she said, did the girl make that landing? Yeah, but the good part is, he said, no, I did.
Bonnie, I want to thank you on behalf of everyone here tonight for coming and sharing some of your stories with us. And now I'll do the shameless plug because it sounds a little better coming from me than you self-promoting. Bonnie has a book. If you want to find it on Amazon, it's available. And you can read stories of Bonnie's time at American and what it was like. Your memoir, basically. It's
Actually,
written
that was 40 years ago, because my son's going to be, 39 this August, and I was pregnant with my son when I wrote that, so that's changed a lot in 39 years.
But it's fascinating reading. I think I read half the book aloud to Dan last week. it's wonderful. So I want to thank you so much for coming in and speaking with us tonight. It's been a pleasure having you. And next time we have a show, don't be a stranger. I'm sure you've got memorabilia in
I've got to learn those quizzes. Very well. Thank you, everybody.